Hello. Good day to everyone, whether it be morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We are going to have a really incredible webinar this afternoon, and we are going to be talking about mitochondria. You know, this is become quite the burgeoning topic, more of that sexy term that has been going around throughout many of the different, influencers and functional medicine practitioners and podcasts, and namely because they are that important. And before we dive into saying and explaining what mitochondria are and what they do and how they affect us and how the heck do we fix it, I want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Laura Varden. I'm an in-house clinician for the DNA company and Dean of DNA University. And I am here with an incredible practitioner. Justin, would you please introduce yourself and say hi to everyone?
Hello. My name is Justin. You may recognize me because I've been on a handful of these now. I'm also on the internal clinician team for the DNA company. I'm a primal health coach. I'm a nutritionist. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I wear a few hats, but functional genomics is the name of the game. And I love this topic because there's this idea of the body recreating itself that I just find very encouraging. I've had so many patients come to me and quite literally ask me, like, man, do you think I have a chance? Like, I've had that happen. And I remind them that your cell expression is always changing. Your body's creating new cells all the time, and it's killing off old cells. And your mitochondria are a really big part of that. So your body reinvents itself, and it reinvents with new mitochondria. So I love this topic because I find it personally encouraging. I think that we have a bit of an energy crisis on our hands for the most part. Almost every patient that I have says that. I've experienced that. I'm sure you have as well, Dr. Varden. So I'm hoping we can get to the bottom of some of that today and really dive deep on mitochondria and what to do about it when they're malfunctioning.
And thank you, Justin. And I'm really excited for this conversation because we do have a lot of information. Probably won't even be able to get to all of it tonight. Hopefully we can even put into a series on how to deal with the mitochondria, with mitochondrial health. I do want to give a shout out to all the people joining us. I'm looking at the chat, kind of catching up with, the plethora that's coming through. And we've got people in Ontario and Serbia and Niagara Falls, Canada, Pennsylvania, Florida. This is fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. So really, what we are focused on here is we are going to talk about mitochondria, what they are, what they do, how they play a role in cellular energy production and your overall vitality. We're going to dive into different strategies, latest research on how you can make some changes to your lifestyle. Also supplements that can be very helpful in supporting your mitochondrial health and energy, and other things that you can do that are free, that you can, that will benefit your mitochondria. So I do want to give a few more minutes for people. If they're still coming in, please take a moment to fill out our poll. And we would love to, get as much feedback from you guys to see where you're at with your mitochondrial health and energy. And what we'll do is we're going to dive a little bit into speaking about mitochondria first, and then we'll start bringing up the poll. So first of all, the interesting thing about mitochondria, and if we have our wonderful little angels in the background that can put up a picture that I have grabbed from the internet that shows what mitochondria look like. They actually are in the cell. Now, as you can see in the left-hand figure, and give me a yes if everybody sees this image. Just let me know that you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so on the left-hand side, you see a cell. This is a cell that we have in our bodies in eukaryotes and animals, okay? And to the right, this is the mitochondria. It's a small organelle that is in the cell. And this organelle, it kind of looks like a bacteria. And the interesting thing is that it is from bacteria. Because eons ago, when we were just this, multicellular, single cellular to multicellular organism, these bacterium fused in and became friends with us, with the beginnings of us. And we started living synergistically with each other, meaning that we both benefited, we worked together. And as we started become this very complex multicellular organism that we call human, these mitochondria became a living, regular part of our cells. And we are dependent on them because one of the biggest jobs that they do in our cell is they provide us with energy. That energy being ATP, that stands for adenosine triphosphate. That is that molecule that provides energy for our bodies. And if any of you ever gone to 4th of July fireworks, a lot of the explosion, that firecracker, is from phosphates, okay? And when I say adenosine triphosphate, those phosphate molecules, when they are split, that produces energy, that gives us heat. So we want those. And when we have these mitochondria, these beautiful little structures, we want them healthy. They give us the energy. And when we talk about mitochondria, now in the image, it only looks like, oh, maybe there's, 20 or 30. When we are talking about cells, there are actually a range of numbers of mitochondria in each and every one of our cells, anywhere from like 10 to hundreds of thousands, depending on the cell type. There's only one cell type that does not have any mitochondria. Those are red blood cells. They don't have any. Going from the lower ones, skin has about 200 or so mitochondria. You start moving up in number, going from to liver, to skeletal muscles, to heart, to brain. The brain. Here's the thing, and this is why when we don't have a lot of energy, we can't think very well, and when everything starts to shut down, because our brain cells, now this is debatable, but some say there are tens of thousands of mitochondria per cell, to as nearly to 2 million mitochondria per cell. So that's a lot. And when you consider that the brain, which is only about 3% of your whole body mass, uses up to 20 to 25% of all of the ATP in your body. That's a lot. Your brain uses and needs a lot of energy to do all the thinking, to do all the workings of your body. Now, I will say there is a cell that has the brain beat, and that actually would be an oocyte, which is a mature egg cell when a baby, to grow. And that can work up, around that amount of like 600,000 to several million. But either way, I want you to realize that mitochondria are so important, but it's also the health of the mitochondria. So if you can bring up the next slide, I want to give you an idea about the slide, or what mitochondria. Like I said, it has to provide energy. Now, on this slide, I put nuclear DNA versus mitochondrial DNA. And yes, mitochondria has its own DNA. Mitochondria is only passed down through the matriarchal line. So just your mother's mother, all the way down. It's only from the mother's line. Super interesting. But when we talk about nuclear DNA is the DNA that we all think about, that we test and that we're looking at. It's basically the DNA found in the nucleus of the cell. Mitochondrial DNA is inside the mitochondria itself. But when you think about how all of this works together, I want you to think of your nuclear DNA, the regular DNA, as the building plans for your house, your body, your house. The mitochondrial DNA is the wiring plans for your house. And you need to make sure that that mitochondria can give your house, your body, enough energy to power the size of your house. Because if it's not, or if you have some short wires, some misalignments or little outages, you're going to feel it. So you can remove the slide now. Thank you. So let's take a look at the poll. Can that be brought back up for me, please? Okay, and you can take the slide down. Perfect. Thank you so much. So I appreciate you guys hanging out for that little educational lesson, but I think it's really important that you understand how all of this works, so that way you can truly appreciate the work you need to put in and what you do to help them do their jobs. So let's take a look. So we have on our poll, so the first question is check all that apply. Are you tired? Yeah, I'm seeing 81% of you have said, yeah, we're tired. We work awfully hard. We do a lot and we do get tired. And with all of the things, coming at us, toxins and, stress and everything else, there's no doubt we are tired. What about feeling run down? About 43% of you have said that you are feeling run down. You're burning that candle at both ends and not getting yourself replenished well enough. Do you poop out at parties? 28% of you said yes. I have to say, I can be one of those too. If I didn't get a good night's sleep, or if I was working hard, yeah, I kind of want to leave a little bit early and hit the hay, at like 9:30. So I hear that. How about, are you unpopular? This is a nice little put a smile on your face, but realizing, yeah, 15% of you do feel like you may be unpopular because you probably don't go out very much. This is something that if you don't have the energy, to do your regular daily things, then you don't really have the energy to go out. And yeah, that can kind of make you feel a little unpopular. Our next question, how satisfied are you with your energy levels? And we did this a rating from 1 to 5, 1 being completely unsatisfied and 5 being very satisfied. And we have that beautiful bell curve, where about, a third of you have said right in the middle, about that number 3. I do like, and I'm very happy to see that about 6% of you said that you are very satisfied with your energy levels. I think that is fabulous. You are obviously doing something right. And for those people who are in the 1s and 2s and even the 3s, this is why you're here. We are here to give you some of that information so we can bump that number up. So at least you can get to the 4s and 5s range. Let's take a look. So do you currently use any supplements to support mitochondrial health? Well, this is about a half and half split, but more of you said no. You may be surprised that some of the foods that you eat and things that you do do allow for mitochondrial support, but zoning in on specific supplementation can give you that little extra boost to boost that number up, to the 4s and 5s, like we were talking about in the last question. Finally, if you do take supplements to support your mitochondria, do you feel like they're working to support your energy? And this is really interesting, a very even 50-50 split of yes and no. That is very telling, because we do tend to try to jump in. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's throw some spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks and what's working, what's not. And this is beautiful. Obviously, throw things in a black box. If it spits out something great and you got the energy, fantastic. But still, it can end up costing. That increase in cost, with supplements, they're not so cheap. And with prices going up now, we need to, pinch our pennies and be precise in where we're putting our money. So it's good to know what is working and what is not. So thank you, everyone, for, filling out that poll. And now we are going to dive in to going over some of this information about mitochondria and health and energy. So Justin, I would love to hear some ideas or things that you have come across with clients, situations, when they come to you and say, I don't have any energy. But where do you start? What do you do?
Diagnosing energy problems is an incredibly complex thing in reality. Like even let's take thyroid, for example, right? People can say, well, I have a thyroid issue. My thyroid gland doesn't produce enough energy. I'm just using this as an example. It's usually way more complex than mainstream medicine is going to say it is, right? It's not just that your thyroid gland doesn't make enough of the thyroid hormone, because in reality, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary, and then the pituitary sends a signal to the thyroid, and then the thyroid makes thyroid gland, but 97% of it, or thyroid hormone rather, is inactive. It's T4. So the conversion has to happen. That happens in the gut and it happens in the liver. Then there's reverse T3. There's all these things going on, right? So trying to identify what's really a broader metabolic problem is really difficult, because that thyroid problem could be a hypothalamus problem. The thyroid problem could be a liver problem, a gut dysbiosis problem, on and on. So I do think that the mitochondria are kind of in the same realm as that, because we need to remember they exist in almost every cell in your body, as you said, Dr. Laura, from 10 to hundreds of thousands, cell by cell. Remember, too, that they actually react to the environmental stimulus that you provide to it. So it's the same thing as genes, right? Like you can't change your genes, but you can change the expression. They react moment by moment to what you do, what you give them. So the mitochondria, they react to external stimulus, like say photons of light. They also react to internal stimulus. Let's say gut dysbiosis. You just said that they're bacteria. So you can almost talk about them like they're a part of the kind of overall microbiome. So diagnosing it is one thing, but really just giving people the right stimulus in the first place is usually where I go with that, because we need to remove things that might be causing the mitochondria to react poorly. And then we need to add the things in that are going to increase or upregulate. People talk about creatine nowadays as if it's almost a nootropic, because you just mentioned the density of mitochondria in your brain. The way creatine works is that your body makes the ATP. As you live, as you move around, your body breaks ATP down into ADP, diphosphate now, and then creatine phosphate repairs the ATP molecule. So this is a larger cellular dysfunction conversation usually, and we've got to kind of work backwards from the problem, understanding that the human body is electrical, it's biochemical, and it's also bacterial, right? So I always start with the genes. We can find out all kinds of stuff about where your body may be malfunctioning, genetically speaking. Do you have a dysregulated SOD2 pathway? Do you have a poor GSTM1 and your gut doesn't detoxify properly? This is why the genes are useful. genes and mitochondria are as relevant as one another as far as how your body actually expresses itself. So, like I said in the beginning, your body's always recreating itself. So we got to look at all your lifestyle behaviors and go, that's probably impacting you poorly. And then we got to substitute it for something correct. This can be anything from, hydration tactics to getting rid of toxic food elements to correcting gut dysbiosis. So this is a roundabout way of me saying that this is not a single fix issue. There's a lot of things that you can do directly to impact mitochondria, like using urolithin A or carbon 60, ketone esters. Yes. But we need to remember that your mitochondria are constantly reacting to both external and internal factors in your environment. So I start with those genes and then I work backwards from the problem as I would with anything and just reinforce the areas that your body is not doing its job, genetically speaking. And then we get into the weeds with lab work and all kinds of other things. Where do you start? Is it kind of the same process as what I do?
Well, it is. And the other thing is that because when we have dysfunctional mitochondria, that really is the foundation of several diseases. So, for example, mitochondrial issues, this contributes to a metabolic syndrome. You are not producing enough energy for the cells to do the job that they are to do in each of these tissues. Well, that can lead to a whole host of things. And so we're talking about things like diabetes, obesity, chronic diseases, which actually diabetes is part of a chronic disease, especially when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1, that's genetic. But for type 2 diabetes, that is an underlying problem that is of metabolic dysfunction. And it also works in and leads and is linked to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cardiovascular diseases, certain cancers. All of these play a part or are a part of, the root cause of your mitochondria not working well. So when I see someone or when I have a client in front of me, first of all, I need to know what is the problem? What are you dealing with? Looking at their DNA to see where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are too, because we always want to lean in on their strengths. But looking at where are the weaknesses, where are those holes in the roof that we need to plug, okay, that is causing the presentation of this dis-ease that they are sitting in front of me, needing help for. So it really comes down to going, what's the issue? Then we can start narrowing down on going, okay, here's how the mitochondria work to affect or to cause this type of dis-ease. And these are more personalized ways that we can fix that we can support your body, your genes, change your environment. Because even though we share, similar environments, it is still personal to where you're living, location, your home. Does it have mold in it? Does it have, a lot of EMF? Is there an airport, down the road? Is there, all of these different things. So it is, there are similarities, but it very much becomes personalized. And this is exactly why we have the programs we do. We actually have come up with a new precision program for people, who may have complex conditions and you just have tried everything or you just don't know what to do. I want to mention something to everyone listening, is that these types of programs, they may sound, oh, wow, the cost and everything else. But honestly, I want you to consider it more as an investment, because as you are going through life, and I'm sure every one of you at some point in your life have been sick, haven't felt well, obviously plenty of you have said you don't have the energy. Well, when you consider, what do you want to do with your life? Going to work, spending time with your family, traveling. If you don't have the energy to do that, if you feel like crap and, you aren't able to, even do the basics, then what are you doing? How can you enjoy life? So instead of, spending the money and drudgery and just continuing to feel like crap, invest in yourself to gain back your energy, to get your life back, to feel normal. No, I take that back, not normal, to feel exceptional, to feel vivacious, where when your alarm goes off or when you wake up, instead of going, ugh, you're like, yeah, let's get this day going. Have a fire under your ass and do something exciting. Don't you want to feel that again? Or ever? If you've never had that, don't you want that? This is what I mean by investing in yourself with information, with data, with people who know and who are in the know, who can provide that precision for you to help you, figure out and wade through the weeds, to not just throw spaghetti on a wall to see what sticks, but to use darts and know exactly where you want to hit. So that's how I want you to envision this, because if you don't have your health, you have nothing. So.
Yeah. Health problems will change you, honestly. Like, I've gone through a handful myself, and it's like they made me negative on the inside. And one thing that I always say is you can only release that which you possess. So if I wake up every day feeling negative, that's really what I end up projecting out towards everybody else. So the precision program is great because you've got an army behind you. If you're really at that point where there's just nothing else, you're going to have a lot of support with that one in particular. So definitely recommend it if you're at that point, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about the program, we've talked about some general things and some specifics about mitochondria, but let's dive a little deeper into mitochondria and what we can do about it. So we said that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It provides the energy currency for energy. And what Justin had said earlier, it does more than that. It is an environmental sensor for the cell. Depending on what's going on, it will determine whether to make the cell give inflammatory cytokines, basically signs for inflammation. It can produce, actually, it's what it's called biogenesis, mitogenesis. It will actually make more of itself if it's called to do so. It can actually cause it to have suicide, which is mitophagy, because it's old and worn out. And it's like, okay, too much. We've got to get rid of ourselves so that way new ones can come up. Okay. It also does what we call a calcium storage, because mitochondria help to regulate calcium levels in the cell, which is really crucial for regular cellular processes, including muscle contraction, nerve impulses and transmission, and hormone secretion. Okay. It does so many things. And I've already had mentioned about heat, that, we're talking about, in physics and thermogenesis. Okay. That heat, that's why we heat up. Even for those people who may have a dysregulated UPC1 gene that ends up being problematic for, heat and temperature control for themselves, there are techniques you can still do to help, with that thermogenesis, with regulating and increasing the brown fat. So that way you do stay warmer longer, okay? Little hint, cold therapies, cold showers, cold plunges, wonderful for that. That also helps to trigger the mitochondria for its own death, for that mitophagy, because we want to get rid of the old senescent, those worn out cells, those old worn out mitochondria. They're not doing their jobs anymore. Let's recycle them. We want to build them stronger. Okay. So mitochondria, they can become complacent. Sitting back in this temperature controlled environment, just kind of hanging out, they get lackadaisy. No, we want them, up and ready like our troops, okay? We want them trained. And that's why we hormetically stress our bodies. Now, what does that mean? Hormetic stress is stresses on the body, like temperature stresses, okay? Like fasting. It stresses the body in a way to make it stronger. Not so much that we end up putting so much stress where we end up injuring and hurting ourselves and making it worse. That's the difference, okay? Hormetic stress is stresses to make us stronger. So, Justin, do you want to speak, unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think hormesis is definitely one of your best friends when it comes to that. And hormetic stress, it's very much a balancing act. It's, as you mentioned, fasting is a stress that provides that positive adaptation. Too much fasting just makes your body think, okay, we're starving now, right? Or weight training, for example. It's a hormetic stress. You're putting your body under load, and it's going to have a direct effect on the mitochondria. It's actually going to increase them. Overtraining is going to have the opposite effect. You're going to get the inflammatory cytokines and all the downstream, sympathetic dominant problems with your nervous system. So getting hot, getting cold, fasting, exercising, all of these things would be those kind of baseline lifestyle behaviors that I would have in place. You could argue that the sunshine is a hormetic stress, like light. That's one of the things that the mitochondria responds to. You can overdo red light therapy. If you did an hour a day of red light therapy, you would be creating oxidants and it would be a problem. But an appropriate dosage of that is a good idea because your mitochondria have receptor sites, right, for photons of light. So getting that sun tanning in, I do it every day now when it's, the summertime. I also use the opportunity to ground. And we all know that Justin doesn't shut up about grounding because, like I mentioned earlier in the call, the human body is electrical in its capacity as well. So, getting cold, getting grounded, getting the sun directly on your body so that your mitochondria reacts to the photons of light, all of those things are going to increase mitochondrial biogenesis. I think that cold exposure is a little bit overrated when it comes to weight loss, but I do think that it's underrated when it comes to this mitochondrial biogenesis thing, because it's absolutely free. I'm assuming you're going to take a shower at some point anyway. So dial it down to that cold, right? That's going to impact the mitochondria. There's certain nutrients as well that you should be getting into your body, like manganese, for example. Very useful for the mitochondria. Ubiquinol is another one that the body uses. And those are in our mitochondrial optimizer supplement, by the way. You can get them other places, but we kind of put it together in a combination. PQQ is an antioxidant that your body uses as well for the mitochondria. I'm also a big fan of hydrogen water. There's a certain pathway called the NRF2 pathway, which is a specific antioxidant pathway for the mitochondria. And hydrogen, it's basically the smallest substance in the world. So it's so small that it gets through the cell membrane and into the mitochondria where it has that selective antioxidant property. So getting the hydrogen in, right? Getting these certain micronutrients in. You mentioned MitoPure, or maybe I mentioned it. Urolithin A is actually a postbiotic that directly encourages that mitophagy. And that company, Timeline Nutrition, which I believe we have a little discount link for, B, if you want to chuck that into the chat box. they did all these studies with athletes in various environments where they increased athletic output by using urolithin A. And it's a pomegranate extract, but only 30% of people have the right gut makeup to actually get the postbiotic property out of pomegranates. So if you don't have that, you can't get urolithin A out of pomegranates. You could eat a friggin' garbage truck full of them and you won't get any urolithin A. So Timeline Nutrition made that MitoPure supplement because irregardless of your gut makeup, you can get urolithin A in a bioavailable manner. So nutrients, right? All these various things with the hormetic stresses, those are your best bet. Every one of them is going to actually impact mitophagy, mitochondrial biogenesis. Get some weightlifting in there, right? All of these things together will have a reverse aging effect because that's what the mitochondria do.
It's some of the things that he's talking about, actually, all these things that he's talking about when it comes to mitochondrial health. When we're talking about the association with DNA, especially what we have in our DNA 360 reports, the area that you want to look at is under the report of anti-inflammation. So the sub-report would be antioxidation. This is one of the detoxification pathways. It really straddles between the phase 1 and phase 2 of detoxification that happens at a cellular level in your liver. That being said, what's important, and the two main genes that we look at that deal with mitochondrial health is SOD2, which Justin had mentioned before, and GPX. Now, SOD2 is superoxide dismutase. GPX is glutathione peroxidase, and what they do is they work in the mitochondria, and they help to break down and remove the oxidants. Because as he was saying, when your body and your mitochondria and your cells are doing work, there are byproducts. There are byproducts of water, and ways that we get rid of that through urine. Carbon dioxide, ways we get rid of that is through breath. But then we also have these oxidants, these reactive oxygen species. How do we get rid of those? That's what our SOD2 does. Our SOD2, you can think of them like two people doing the dishes, okay? SOD2 is your dishwasher. GPX is your dish rinser. Dirty dishes piling up on the side of the sink, those are the oxidants. Well, those hang around too often. It can really make a mess and make the house smell, and we want to get them cleaned up. In our cells, it ages our cells. It's what causes wrinkles, gray hair. Of course, stress in itself causes problems with mitochondria, which increase oxidants. And my issue was from a car accident and lots of surgeries and lots of medication. But when you're talking about these oxidants building up, SOD2, our dishwasher, takes the oxidants, scrubs them, creates bubbles. That's your hydrogen peroxide. Dish rinser, he rinses the suds. He is breaking down the hydrogen peroxide into oxygen and water, which I've already just mentioned. But we have to finish removing that with glutathione and getting out of the cell. This is why it is so important about looking at how are your genetics. Is your SOD2 fast? Is it cleaning those dishes well, quickly? Or is it slow and he's letting those dirty dishes pile up? Because there are ways we can support that, like Justin mentioned, with our Black Label Mitochondrial Optimizer, with things that are antioxidants. And there are many antioxidants. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. Vitamin E, so anytime you see like tocotrienols or tocopherols. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, is a fantastic antioxidant. It is also a precursor for glutathione, for creating glutathione and that glutathione conjugation pathway. Other supplements that he had mentioned, C60 C60 Purple Power. This is actually a supplement that is created. It's a carbon 60. That's what the C stands for. It is an incredible antioxidant that does its job. It's this buckyball that grabs these oxidants, gets them out of the cell. That helps. The hydrogen water. Again, this helps with removing these oxidants, removing these toxic molecules that wear down, destroy, and injure and destroy our cells, our mitochondria. That's why they are important. That's what they do. That's why they're helpful. So it's not like you have to take all of them. It's finding what works for you in your budget, in your lifestyle, in, whatever you're doing. Obviously, some of these things, because they do work on a little bit different pathways, can be very helpful in combination. But again, this is why we're giving you the information. We are giving you resources. Do your own research. And if you want, come work with one of us and we can help figure all of that out to clear those muddy waters and decide what are the best supplements for you. What is the best course of action for you? So I want to, seeing that we are almost to the top of the hour, and we have some wonderful questions, I'd like to start diving into some of them. So let's see if, and by the way, if anyone in the chat, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, or, depending on how, if we get through all the ones in the Q&A, then I'll see if I can hop back over to answer any in the chat. So let's see. First question, and actually there's a couple of them. Julie asked, and so did Najala, are there ways to test the health of your mitochondria? And yes, absolutely there are. There are direct tests, and this works into mitochondrial DNA analysis as well. And that's through sequencing that can actually detect mutations in mitochondrial DNA that can affect mitochondrial function. There's also something called copy number assessment, which actually we do with a few of our genes as well. And that actually measures the amount of mitochondrial DNA in cells, which can obviously indicate mitochondrial biogenesis and overall health. There's also things like mitochondrial function tests, and these include oxygen consumption rate tests, OCR, that measures the rate at which cells consume oxygen, because that actually can provide insight into the efficiency of the electron transport chain that happens to produce ATP in the mitochondria. There are different things like ATP production rate, which directly measures the amount of ATP produced by the mitochondria. There's other things. I mean, there's a few others. Let's see, there's mitochondrial membrane potential. There's the reactive oxygen species production, which we've already talked about what reactive oxygen species are, which actually assesses the level of these ROSs, reactive oxygen species, that are generated by the mitochondria and can indicate if there's excess. And then there's also indirect tests, things like blood tests, biopsies, histology analysis, metabolomics, which include things like blood, urine, tissue. All of these things can identify any abnormalities. Then there's also like functional tests. So these are like exercise, measuring your physical performance and recovery. How well are you recovering? How much energy do you have? When it comes to these physical performance tests. And of course, then there's also imagery, magnetic resonance spectroscopy, which it actually measures levels like phosphocreatine in muscles. Then there's PET scans, positron emission tomography, which can also do that. So there's a lot of different ways and new ways coming out all the time. So again, realizing that the mitochondria, the focus on mitochondrial health, mitochondrial dysfunction is such a hot topic now and is building momentum and interest in the scientific research field as well as the clinical field. There is so much money and interest and research going into it. So this really is the time to dive in and find out more about yours. So lots of great information. All right. Justin, is there a question there? Oh, here's one that that you could answer. What foods are particularly helpful in supporting and providing nourishment to mitochondria, and what foods should be avoided? And that was asked by Deborah.
Yeah, so there's a number of foods that are going to be useful here. I actually remember Kashif made a post specifically about this on X, and he talked about the things that you would think are on there are actually on there. Blueberries, there's a thing called the ORAC scale, which is like kind of a way of quantifying the antioxidant content of food. And there's some foods on there that are surprising actually on the higher end, like mint and clove, and anything that's high ORAC is going to have that trickle down effect of being very useful because of the antioxidant capacity. Salmon is great, right? Anything that's going to give you some high quality omega-3s. We know that those integrate into the cell membranes and keeps the inflammation down. Olive oil is great for that. Anything that has manganese, like I mentioned before. Dr. Laura talked about the SOD2 pathway, and another name for superoxide dismutase is also manganese superoxide dismutase. People will call it that because it's a cofactor in how that entire SOD2 pathway works, right? So there's certain types of nuts that have manganese in there. You can get it from dietary sources. The foods to avoid would be also the ones that you would think, right? In my view, anything that has inflammatory seed oils in there. I know that even that is slightly controversial. There's certain people that don't believe in that. Like Dr. Lane Norton, for example, he doesn't believe in that. I think most of us do at this point because of the way they integrate into your cell membranes and take forever to get out of there, months sometimes. So, the processed carbohydrates, things that really aren't food. We talk about junk food, but really there's junk and then there's food. It's really not the same category, junk food, because there's a certain point where you can't really call it food. So anything like that, anything that has toxins and glyphosate, pesticides, all of those are going to impact the mitochondria. We've talked about stress and hormetic stress. There's also just straight up stress. Poison is something your body interprets as stress, right? So you're adding to the totality of your body's stress load, and that's going to work its way into the mitochondrial system. So get some high quality fatty acids in there, anything that supports the cells. Things that have tocotrienols in there, there's walnuts, these various things that have vitamin E present. Those would be the foods I would include. But there's a tremendous asterisk I have to put next to this, and that you need to eat for your DNA, right? There is never this one size fits all, because you might handle starches great, somebody else might not. Someone might have suboptimal insulin genetics to where your blood sugar is going up and down just from eating a certain type of macronutrient. So we need to personalize it. I would get the Gut 360. I would get the DNA 360 for sure. Then we can work backwards and figure out the ideal diet. But in general, high ORAC foods, high quality fatty acids, those are going to be your best bet for that.
Thank you. Yeah, great information. Let's dive into a question from Saad, a little bit more specific as far as deficiencies, genetically speaking. And so Saad asked, is G6PD deficiency genetic, or can it be acquired? Mentions that this deficiency can increase oxidative stress, which can be linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. This can cause hemolytic anemia, which can cause tiredness and dizziness. What are some of the supplements that help with this situation? And mentions that NAC, N-acetylcysteine supplement, is an option given, and that it's a precursor for glutathione, which I had mentioned earlier. So G6PD deficiency, this is a genetic disorder, and it is inherited it's an X-linked recessive pattern. And what that means is that it's on the X chromosome. So our sex chromosomes, X and Y, is male, because remember you have two sex chromosomes. So an X and Y is a male, XX is a female. So it is something, because men only have one sex chromosome, they are more likely to be affected, while women having two are typical carriers, but they can also be affected if both the chromosomes carry that particular mutation. So you were talking about, yes, the oxidative stress way of association. So that enzyme does play a crucial role in mitochondrial dysfunction because it works in the protection of red blood cells from oxidative damage. And it also is very important in the regeneration of reduced glutathione, which, like I mentioned, is a master antioxidant of the cell. As far as supplements, yes, N-acetylcysteine is wonderful because it being a precursor to glutathione. Also vitamin E, which I had mentioned before, being a powerful antioxidant. Vitamin C, again, you want these natural, strong antioxidants. Another one that I didn't mention, but is very important, is selenium. Selenium is actually necessary for glutathione production, and it's a trace mineral. It's a cofactor for glutathione peroxidase, which I had mentioned as far as in the mitochondria, in that pathway for clearing out these oxidants. So another one is lipoic acid, specifically alpha lipoic acid. Also really good for supporting mitochondrial function. And I know that Justin had mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again, CoQ10. Specifically ubiquinol, simply because that particular form is more bioavailable than ubiquinone. So, and we actually have that form in our black label. So that answers that person. Okay, next question. Justin, I'm going to have you take this one. It's from Michael Green. And he asks, can you talk about brain fog? How are the mitochondria involved? And what would cause extreme brain fog some days when energy levels are decent most other days?
Interesting. So as Dr. Varden mentioned, I mean, your brain has an incredible density of mitochondria. It's got the second highest density of mitochondria in your whole body. So that being said, there's certainly a role that the mitochondria are playing in there. I would, however, say that it's not the only factor to consider, right? We talk a lot about BDNF, for example, right? Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and there is a gene that encodes that has the same namesake. So if you have had your DNA 360 done, look at that BDNF gene as well. There can also be things like heavy metal toxicity. You know, we have a lady, lovely lady who works with us named Lynn Angel. And she is an expert in heavy metal toxicity, mercury specifically, and it has a tremendous impact on brain, function as well. The way that your brain works is going to have a trickle-down effect in how every cell in your body works. So I would say normally they're going to be one and the same, but there could be days where your body feels okay because your muscles have enough ATP, but your brain is still foggy due to toxicity, heavy metals, etc. I've struggled with brain fog myself, and there's a number of things that I do for that. Usually hydration tactics, first thing in the morning, getting some electrolytes is a pretty good call because it's very electrical. Electrolyte would suggest that it's electrical, right? So that's one of the things that your brain requires. Getting the right amount of fatty acids and in a good balance as well. Your brain is made out of fat, and it's sitting in a bucket of fat basically inside of your head. I'm a big fan of using things like ketone esters, which I know I've mentioned a couple times on these podcasts, because your brain functions very well on ketones. It can use glucose and it can use ketones. Ketones is a great fuel because it gives your brain some long-lasting energy. And I've noticed a tremendous reduction in brain fog since I started doing that. Intermittent fasting, I've also noticed, has had some pretty good cognitive effects. And that's actually an ancient mechanism, because when the hunter-gatherer days took place, we had to have strength and we had to be cognitively there in order to hunt and kill the mammoth. So later on in a fast, your cognition actually starts to sharpen. So sometimes just giving your brain a break from food will actually amplify your cognition. Omega-3s, there's the more obvious stuff in there. I'm also a big fan of BrainTap. That device uses photobiomodulation and binaural beats alongside these meditation tracks. And I love it because it does not ask your brain's permission, right? You just have to kind of press a button and it will actually pull your brain into these various brain waves, and it increases neuroplasticity, right? So your brain's ability to get to these different, brain waves is great. I would have to know a little bit more about you as well to really go super deep, because your sleep is going to matter a lot there. Are you eating properly according to your genes and your microbiome? Is your microbiome healthy? Is your body toxic via the glutathione pathways? So there's a few things that I would have to look at. So I would recommend a coaching program, but I would rely on those kinds of things. Nootropics are also very powerful these days. I use one called Qualia Mind. I like that because it has a caffeine-free version as well as a caffeinated version. And sometimes it's not a good idea to just spike your brain with additional stimulants. But if you look at that one, Qualia Mind from Neurohacker Collective, the ingredient list is just beautiful. There's so many moving parts to it. It's also targeting BDNF among other pathways. So sometimes just having some bulletproof coffee, right, and some nootropics after hydrating and a shot of ketones can go pretty far. We also talked about cold exposure. That reliably gets my brain going and it amplifies my energy for the day as well. So those are the starting points. I would have to know your genes to go a little bit deeper on that, but start with all the things that make your body and your brain feel good.
Absolutely. And I will admit, I love Qualia Mind, and Qualia Mind helped me to get through the end of my grad school when I was writing my dissertation.
Yeah.
So gotta say, that's definitely several thumbs up. But yeah, I mean, all the things that Justin is talking about, fantastic. And there's so many products and lifestyle integrations that you can make that can really increase your energy and to help heal your body. Oh, which reminds me, I also wanted to mention methylene blue. I really like methylene blue. That's another one that has been absolutely fantastic, has a lot of research as a nootropic. It is FDA approved for methemoglobinemia, which is a condition where the red blood cells are not able to hold the oxygen very well. Well, you will find it in all emergency rooms because it's used as an antidote for the toxicity of carbon monoxide poisoning, cyanide poisoning, because what ends up happening in the red blood cell, the heme, which can hold 4 oxygen molecules each, will actually grab the carbon monoxide. Well, you start, filling up, these red blood cells with carbon monoxide, guess what? You're not going to be able to breathe very well. Okay. So what they do is they give you the methylene blue, usually by IV in the ER, and it changes the form of the heme, kicks out the carbon monoxide and allows oxygen to reattach. So you can breathe again. So yes, it is FDA approved, but it has been studied where they found that there were other effects that were wonderful, energy increasing and better neuro pathways were working better. I've actually prescribed, I do not prescribe, I recommended it for a client that I had, a 10-year-old who had a seizure disorder. And that was one of the things that he used, and it really helped to where the seizures were spread out. I mean, there were other things that we did, but instead of having, multiple seizures a day, he may only have one every, 6 weeks to several months. So, but there's been studies on Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative disorders and also mood disorders. But I do have to say, before you start jumping into that, please check for contraindications, because if you are taking an SSRI, they don't recommend you take it at the same time. So, but it is a wonderful product. A lot of my clients who have, fatigue and other issues, that has helped tremendously. So I wanted to give a little, not necessarily a plug, but it's something that works. I have no affiliation with it, but I know it works and I use it myself. So another question that had come up by Anne Marie. She asks how long to fast until autophagy and or mitophagy kicks in while fasting. Is fasting mimicking diet? And she mentions Walter Longo. So when it comes to autophagy and mitophagy, both of these processes really begin to activate around 12 to 16 hours of fasting. But to really get significant activity, that's going to hit around 24 to 48 hours when you really start getting into that process. And as far as like fasting mimicking diets, based on Dr. Walter Longo's work, that can effectively mimic the benefits of fasting, including autophagy, while allowing some food intake. So it really is a practical alternative for those people who can't complete, more extended fasting challenges. I do want to mention, though, it is not something you should just take on cavalierly, on your own. This is, if you are going to be doing any type of fasting challenge, fasting regimen, please consult with a healthcare provider, especially if you have any underlying health conditions. Start gradually. I mean, if you have never done more than 12 hours before food, or, in between a meal, start there and then just start increasing it, like, maybe an hour at a time, and, get your body used to it. You need to work into becoming metabolically flexible. What does that mean? What that means is your ability to burn fat for fuel as easily as sugar for fuel. And Justin talked about this earlier in this webinar. So that's really what you want to be able to do is, be metabolically flexible. Fasting is a great way to do that. And the product that he had mentioned earlier with urolithin A, Timeline, Mitopure by Timeline, that actually gets you into that state and starts triggering that process. So next.
Yeah, I understand too that, sorry, Dr. Vard, I was just going to say that fasting would fall under the category of one of those hormetic stressors that we talked about before, right? So there is a balancing act with that, and it also depends how you do it. I've had people start intermittent fasting and it worked great. Other people lost muscle mass because they didn't do it properly. So if it's going to be kind of with just IF, like intermittent fasting, find your window, right, and make it work for your schedule so that you're not eating, right up until you go to bed. There's a couple of little things, but what I would say is that make sure that once that eating window kicks in, we do want to make sure that you're getting enough protein and micronutrients and what have you so that your body doesn't go into this scarcity mode, right? I always say that fasting is useful because food is information. And sometimes we got to give your body a break from yesterday's information before we go piling today's on. And it will impact the mitochondria. It will impact the microbiome in positive ways. But we don't want your body to go, we're fasting because there's just no food, right? That can have that sympathetic response in your body, and your body can freak out. We don't want to be malnourished in order to have some sort of autophagy going on. So be aware of that. And you may want to add in something if you're going to start losing muscle mass due to over fasting. So you can use like MAP aminos. I know that you're a fan of those, Dr. Varden.
Yeah.
You can do a bone broth fast. There's a number of ways you can do it. But to just jump into a several day fast, or to just jump into OMAD or something like that, I would work your way up to that. Start with that 12 and 12. How do I feel? Make sure you're hydrating properly while you're doing it. All of those things. Maybe a 16 and 8 is ideal for you. Maybe an 18 and 6 is ideal for you. But make sure the second that you need to start eating, you're getting enough protein and enough nutrients. And it is a balancing act. Too much hormetic stress is just stress. So be aware of that.
Thank you for that. I was looking at in the chat, and when it comes to mitochondrial health and what can cause them to not work so well, and it was brought up and mentioned about poisons. Absolutely. Toxins, you bet. And we are inundated with toxins in our environment, in our food, in our water, in our air, in even some things that get put into our bodies that we may not realize. These are putting massive stresses on our cells, on our mitochondria, and subsequent things that have happened over the last few years, long COVID and other subsequent conditions that have happened from getting the COVID shots. People have become injured, and I do have clients that have come to me. I have friends, I have family that, after what has happened over the last several years, their energy levels are way down, the brain fog, they just are not feeling like themselves. Yes, those things can impact your health, your mitochondria, your energy. And regardless of what exactly it is, or, the exact nature of it, there are still foundational things that you can do to strengthen your body, strengthen your immune system, strengthen your mitochondria, get some energy back. Now, I can't give you guarantees. There are no guarantees in life except for death and taxes, okay? But these are things that can help, because I know personally people whose lives are absolutely in the toilet because they have no energy, they feel sick, they have these conditions where honestly they feel like total crap. They can't do anything. That's no life. So starting with the foundations, looking at these basic things, starting to implement some of these things, this is what we are here to help you with. There was one last question about magnesium, forms of magnesium, what are good to take. Now I could plug certain particular magnesiums companies. BioOptimizers actually is wonderful, taking them myself. And really what it's about, it's getting the different forms of magnesium. You want to get forms that end in ate, ATE. For example, magnesium malate, magnesium bisglycinate, magnesium citrate. Okay, now each of these do something a little different. For example, magnesium citrate. This is a very good bioavailable, easily absorbed form. It is often used to treat constipation, and it does provide, general magnesium supplement for the body. Getting a little bit more specific, magnesium glycinate. This is wonderful because it has very high bioavailability, but it's gentle on the stomach. So you got a wrecked gut. And, some of these supplements are just not doing very well. for you, but you need to have magnesium, because I will tell you magnesium is really important and is necessary because it has to attach to ATP to make it bioavailable. So we need to have magnesium. Magnesium bisglycinate, being easy on the gut, is a good form to take. Magnesium malate. This is really good for energy production. So, I mean, we're talking about increasing energy. Well, magnesium malate helps to do that, and actually helps to support in the reduction of muscle pain, especially for people who have fibromyalgia. Okay, things like magnesium threonate. This form readily crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it's often used to support cognitive function, memory, brain health. I mean, there's several different types, other types like taurate, magnesium taurate, which is attached to the amino acid taurine. Again, there's a lot of different forms. BioOptimizers offers 7 different forms in their particular formulation, but there are others as well. So I hope that gave you a little bit more of information on magnesiums themselves. Let's see if we have any other questions to grab.
Yeah, Jennifer asked a question about mitochondrial impact on adrenal depletion. So that's an interesting one, because this is at the beginning of the call when I started ranting about thyroid, I would say that adrenal, this terminology of adrenal fatigue, for example, is kind of in the same, spectrum as that, because there's a thing called the HPA axis, right? Hypothalamus and pituitary adrenal. So people tend to label a lot of things as being adrenal fatigue or adrenal depletion, but there's a lot of moving parts to it, right? There's actually the adrenal medulla, there's the adrenal cortex, which has 3 different parts to it. Your body doesn't just, create cortisol every time you're stressed. There's a whole pathway going on there with various enzymatic processes. So when the limbic system, which is like how your body perceives stress from the environment, gets activated, the sympathetic nervous system turns on, and ultimately the adrenals are stimulated, but it's part of a broader pathway, right? There's a lot going on to it. I would say that if you do have mitochondrial dysfunction, it's going to actually stimulate the limbic system in a roundabout way, right? Because your body's not working as well as it should. You don't have enough energy, and you're going to be stressed. And then the stress triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. Ultimately, you end up with a cortisol dominance. So I would say, nourishing the adrenal glands in and of themselves with enough minerals and high quality sea salts and these kinds of things are useful. I would pay attention to your cortisol to DHEA ratio if you can ever get that tested, because that's a really, really good test for indicating an anabolic state versus a catabolic state. But it's not zoomed in on adrenal fatigue itself, right? It's giving you kind of a broader view of sex hormones versus stress hormones. So I would recommend looking at that. But, more generally speaking, yeah, if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, it is probably going to cause some level of cortisol dominance, but more as a trickle down effect. That's my opinion anyway. I don't know if you have a separate thing to say about that, Dr. Varden.
Actually, I think that you have summarized that quite well. And there were a few other questions that I did want to touch on before we close this webinar out. So I did want to comment a little bit more. Someone had mentioned about the magnesium, that magnesium and Celtic salt, magnesium oil and Celtic salt, creating magnesium chloride, but also topical magnesiums are wonderful. So if you really don't want to be taking in more pills, there are actually sprays. Beam Minerals has what they call Instalight, which is a spray. I'll tell you what, this stuff is wonderful. I use it myself along with taking Beam Minerals, because that offers a whole suite of the trace minerals that our bodies need for repair and recovery. But with the Instalight, it has more magnesium, And I periodically will get leg cramping at night. And boy, when I feel that starting, or when that wakes me up, I grab that Instalight spray that on, and thank God within, like less than a minute, it starts calming down enough where I'm not like shrieking in pain. So this is something that it's not like you have to take a pill. Okay. There are other ways, whether, topical, or even taking an Epsom salt bath. That's magnesium sulfate. So you can soak in an Epsom salt bath for about 15 minutes and get that magnesium uptake. So there's a lot of different ways for you to be able to take that in. There was also another question about alcohol, how alcohol can affect mitochondria. And, alcohol, granted, I like a nice glass of red wine every once in a while with dinner, but alcohol can have several detrimental effects on mitochondria, and especially when it comes to chronic consumption of it, because it increases that oxidative stress. It actually produces those reactive oxygen species that we spoke about. And that obviously damages your mitochondrial DNA, the proteins, lipids, all these different things. And it particularly can disrupt that electron transport chain that I mentioned before that happens in the mitochondria that creates ATP. We don't want that. We need the energy. So really, it also can disrupt mitochondrial biogenesis, the ability for new mitochondria to be created and grow. And also in the mitochondria's ability to sense the environment, because it can affect the membrane, okay, that membrane potential. It's sensor. Okay. So again, we don't want to be damaging that. So that's some of the things that alcohol can do to disrupt or injure our mitochondria.
Yeah, and a good alternative, by the way, to alcohol would be something like kava, which you can use, and you can get pretty good sources of it. And, there's places like in Hawaii, for example, there's places on some of those islands that have more kava bars than they do alcohol bars, because kava actually binds to the GABA receptor in the same way that alcohol does, but it has what's called a reverse tolerance effect, right? So part of the reason why alcohol makes you feel like crap, there's the toxicity element there, the dehydration element there, but it actually will down-regulate GABA response if you continue to do it. So GABA makes you feel calm. It's a part of the social lubricating effect that you get from alcohol. But overall, when you zoom out, you're getting less and less bioavailable GABA. So kava, it also activates that same receptor, but it improves the receptor. It improves the pathway. So it actually has a reverse tolerance effect, which is a funny thing. I've used it before, and honestly, you can get ones that are more targeted for nootropic properties, and then you can get ones that are a little bit more calming, almost similar to how like the cannabis family has like sativas that get you all uppity and you want to watch documentaries, or it's got ones that are more calming and more CBD content to kind of down-regulate the nervous system so you can settle yourself down a little bit. Kava has the same idea there, and you can use it as kind of a mocktail, right? So I've done that before along with ketone esters. I'll do a shot of ketones, which tastes like crap, and then I'll add the kava in as well, and it kind of calms me down but has a nootropic effect at the same time. And I'll add it into a carbonated coconut water or something like that, and maintain my sobriety, but also not be the party pooper like we mentioned at the beginning of the call on the questionnaire.
Perfect. So in this last minute or so, we actually had a request by Max to give a quick recap of what supplements or treatments overall are best for mitochondrial function. So going from the larger scheme and then funneling down to more specifics, you really want to focus on dietary adjustments. You want to implement a diet rich in nutrients that support mitochondrial function, that have antioxidants, things that are found in fruits, vegetables, your omega-3 fatty acids, anything that can mitigate this oxidative stress and improve performance. So again, foods that are rich in vitamin E, vitamin C, NAC, or cysteine. Throw out some others for me.
Oh, yeah, foods that are rich in tocotrienols, right? So our CoQ10, like heart, actually, as far as like beef organs, heart is super duper high in CoQ10. It's not ubiquinol, but it's still the same overall nutrient. So heart, organs are great for that. Look at that ORAC list as well. That's ORAC. ORAC list. You can actually pull that up, and it's got all these high antioxidant foods at the top.
So really you want to focus to make sure your foods have that as well, the phytonutrients. Okay, so these are the antioxidants found in these fruits and vegetables. So another large, umbrella to help support mitochondrial function is exercise. You need to move your body. Regular physical activity has been shown to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. And not to mention that it gives off a whole host of wonderful neurotransmitters and hormones and anandamide, all of these different energetic things. So, it's not necessarily that you have to go to the gym and lift heavy things, even though that is good. But to just do some joyful movements, dancing in the kitchen. I love to dance in the kitchen with my 15-month-old granddaughter every morning. She just giggles and laughs and bounces around, and it brings me so much joy. Move my body, you need to move, get some physical exercise. And diving into supplements, this is reflective of the foods that we were just talking about, foods that are rich in vitamin E, C, NAC, CoQ10, all of these things. So you can actually start to zone in on these specific supplements if you feel the need to do so. Also PQQ, which Justin mentioned at the top of the webinar, several different ones. Please, you can always go back because we did name off all of these. You can watch the replay to get some of this. Also, then diving into specific strategies and some of those things that are not your typical supplements, like the methylene blue, which, by the way, Justin had mentioned earlier about red light therapy. I will tell you that there has been research done and books written about the synergistic beneficial effects of methylene blue with red light therapy. It actually multiplies the benefits of the healing capacity and mitochondrial biogenesis of the two together. So if you take the methylene blue, which, by the way, I prefer the liquid drops. I don't have to reconstitute if it's in the powder form. I'm a little lazy in that because I want my energy to go elsewhere. So I just get it in the dropper form. I usually do like 10 drops in a little small thing of juice, a little shot glass of some unsweetened juice, actually pomegranate juice. I usually do that, take that once, maybe twice a day. Just be careful because it does stain. But, taking that about 20 minutes before a red light therapy session, boom, you just have increased their efficacy. Doing cold plunges, cold therapies, a PEMF, grounding, all of these types of things, they all help with mitogenesis, with the functioning of your mitochondria. So I hope you guys, got a lot of that information, that you've been able to take away some little golden nuggets that you can take with you and start implementing. And if you do have any questions, please, send us a note. You can contact our client care if you're interested in any of our programs. Also visit our Facebook group. and take, look at our DNA Talks podcast. We're always giving great information there, as well as our YouTube channel where you can find replays on this. So I want to say thank you. Thank you, Justin, for your brilliance, for being here always, for the work that you do with the clients and with our audience. Such amazing information. I appreciate you so much. You are such an integral part of this team. I really appreciate you. I appreciate all of you in the background making all of this work. And mainly, I appreciate every single one of you out there of our audience. You are why we do this. If it weren't for you, we'd be twiddling our thumbs. So we appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. Please sign up and attend future webinars. If there's anything else that you want to hear, send us a note. Let us know what you are interested in, because we are here for you. Thank you, and have a beautiful night.
And likewise,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.